following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy's Revelations.
You can't handle the truth.
Here comes music.
Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. Today it is Friday. Happy Friday. Got a lot of news to get through, over 30 headlines, starting out with United Kingdom and France are sending troops, ground troops, into Ukraine. So this will be the kickoff for World War III. We know that already there's been some mystery surrounding missing troops in Lithuania. We know they've canceled an election in Romania, all to kick off World War III. So that is indeed going to happen. You put in European peacekeepers or troops on the ground in Ukraine. These troops aligned with NATO get killed, and we're off to the races. So it's a big spoiler for the peace plan that seems to be taking hold in some regards for Trump. All right, let's get into the news for today, Friday, March 28th, 2025. All right, we start out with the Associated Press, as we usually do. One of the top headlines today is Trump withdraws Representative Elise Stefanik's nomination from UN ambassadorship, citing tight GOP House margin. So we're going to delve into this in some detail, and might as well go right into the story from the Associated Press. Trump confirmed he was withdrawing the New York Republicans' nomination in a Truth Social post, saying that it was essential that we maintain every Republican seat in Congress. Definitely agree with that. The reality is here, which it was kind of a mistake, in Florida, Matt Gaetz gave up his congressional seat to try to get into the Attorney General post in the administration, but ended up resigning for no good reason. So his seat is up, and also the National Security Advisor Mike Waltz's seat, also in Florida, is up. And if Elise Stefanik took the ambassadorship at the UN, her seat would be up, and her seat is one that is a little more contested. So let's get into the headline from NBC News, which is GOP anxiety persists ahead of Florida special elections in Trump territory. Trump is making a late effort to boost GOP turnout for Tuesday's special election in Florida's 1st and 6th congressional districts, as Republicans look to boost their House majority. I don't know about boosting. Maintaining is the key here. And so let's get into let's just dive into this NBC News story for just a minute. Voters will cast their ballots in next week's Florida's 1st and 6th congressional districts, 2 deep red seats that President Donald Trump won easily in November. Both races are more competitive, so they say at NBC, thanks to a wave of Democratic money and early votes. Cheating. So they're making a play. The Democrats are actually on a roll. Everybody's talking about the Democratic Party being defeated. They were just regrouping, and they're going to come out with all this lawfare using the federal judges to attack Trump and the Trump administration's agenda, and trying to undermine Republicans everywhere, and basically in the public perception of what Trump is doing, that are looking to sully that narrative of Trump being very successful and saying he's being very successful at ruining the lives of Americans, which actually their lives will improve momentarily. The story goes on to say Republicans are wary that the close and expected contest could fuel a narrative that voters are reacting negatively to Trump's presidency and that the Democrats have the momentum heading into next year's midterms elections. This is all the play. This is the playbook. But what we do understand is that it's the narrative that voters are reacting negatively to Trump's presidency. That's a narrative that they're perpetuating that doesn't necessarily exist. And they've been able to do this very effectively, especially in the Democratic cult, telling their constituencies or their party followers that this is indeed the case when all they do is perpetuate lies. There's no realized people. The majority of people are in a wait and see, especially among the detractors that might have voted for Trump. You know, his faithful are saying things will turn around. I don't know how faithful I am. I believe there will be a turnaround. You look at all the policy decisions. As soon as Wall Street settles down, I think you'll see, and it's going to take time, especially for the energy projects to produce. So let's go over to Politico. Politico says Stefanik's withdrawal suggests Republicans are sweating their thin margins. Democrats insist Republicans are panicking. So in the subhead and in the head, Politico says that Republicans are sweating and that they're panicking. So they just reiterate in the subhead, and that's not what the subhead is for. So you know it's a narrative. If they keep having to say it, it's called, and you could just go back to the NBC headline, GOP, quote unquote, anxiety persists. And then Politico, sweating and then panicking. And it's called psychic driving. And so what you do in every media outlet, you just use words. They're all mean the same thing. And you see this time and time again, is they pound the viewer with psychic driving. The Republicans are sweating. The Republicans are panicking. What did NBC say? The Republicans are anxious. I think it's about, we don't want to start losing control, of the House, Senate, etc. But in this specific instance, the House, before we even get started. So I don't know. There is a lot of legislation looking to codify what Trump is doing, but not enough. And the Democrats keep threatening filibuster, so we're going to be hard pressed to pass anything. So the executive orders are the way to go, but if we could try to codify, we should try to do that. All right, so I'm going to move on to this article from the Wall Street Journal. Ruben Gallego on how Democrats can start winning, embrace wealth. The senator from Arizona is one of the few Democrats who carried a state Trump won in November. If Democrats they're already considered the party of the elite. So they're saying, Gallego is saying, embrace wealth. I think that's a bad turn because the majority of Americans are not wealthy. So middle America. And that's how Trump won, is by appealing to the American middle class. If the Democrats decide to embrace wealth, they're just in an echo chamber talking to the same fucking people, the celebrities in Hollywood, and Silicon Valley, they've already lost. But the elite up and down the East Coast and the celebrities in California and the elite in California. You're not going to win over middle America by embracing wealth, and that includes corporations. That's not going to work. All right, let's get back to more lawfare against Trump. All right, so my whole thing about Signal was, this whole Signal controversy was a conspiracy. So somehow that number, Jeffrey Goldberg's number of all the people. It's not like you got Tucker Carlson's number in there or a conservative reporter. You got one of the most liberal Trump-hating prominent journalists, editors for one of the most liberal magazines. How did they get on a national security thread? So I think it's a conspiracy. They're looking to find that kink in the armor, and I think they're going to run with this signal thing. So you marry that with the success, the only success the Democrats have been having, which is lawfare. And this goes back to the article from the Wall Street Journal. They're using the wealthy conspiracy of socialists, left-leaning politicians, or people involved in the blue cult who have wealth. They're the ones that can bring the lawsuits to federal district courts where they probably know the judges, but they know the judges are also in the blue cult. And so they make this performative case. Oh, we're arguing something of legal precedence. Not really. Knowing the judge will side with them and institute an injunction or a stay to block Trump, hoping that the Supreme Court down the line will overturn what Trump is doing. That's not the case. All they could do is launch a stay, and it's not working. All right, which brings me to this AP article. Judge orders government to preserve signal messages about Houthi military strike. Federal judge on Thursday ordered the Trump administration to preserve records of a text message chat in which senior national security officials discussed sensitive details of plans or U.S. military strike against Yemen's Houthis, who were supported by Iran, by the way. This is a Shia-Sunni conflict. The U.S. District Judge James Boasberg, where have I heard his name before, barred administration officials from destroying messages that were sent over the encrypted messaging app Signal. A nonprofit watchdog, American Oversight, requested the order. Of course they did. Who is American Oversight? A government attorney said the administration already was taking steps to collect and save the messages. So complying. But American Oversight is obviously some other left-wing NGO that is part of the blue conspiracy, the blue cult, that these people are intertwined. And the great thing about what the Democrats did, the liberals did, progressives did, is they found a unifying message in defying Trump. So if you know anything about basic psychology, especially group psychology, if you can focus people's attention on something, either in support of or detracting of, that you can build cohesion within a group. More news. The Federalist. There's absolutely nothing but politics to the time-wasting Signal chat hullabaloo. Goes into the story upon reading the headline, the byline, and the first few sentences of the Jeffrey Goldberg piece in The Atlantic. We all knew this would be a nothing burger, and the author here, Teresa Horgenstern, says, as a former intelligence professional, I immediately knew that no classified information could have been shared and that the only thing that could be shared would be coordinating efforts. I was proven correct as I read Goldberg's perspective on the chat, and once I read the full story. So she is agreeing that this is, it's not that it's a nothing burger, it's a something burger in the sense of that it is a ploy by the progressive liberal socialist movement, the blue cult, to find a kink in the armor to wedge in their spear. At least as far as a narrative goes, because it's very easy to sully Trump. They did it with the Russia collusion hoax and the very fine phone call or good persons on both sides, whatever. All they have to do is to find a propaganda catalyst, a seed that they could grow into something overwhelming. And this signal chat, which I believe was uncovered through a conspiracy, is that seed that is going to flourish into something that is going to dog the Trump administration for at least the next year and a half. The article goes on to say the ridiculous calls for resignations and arrests across the border silly. Today's most critical voices displayed so much moral grandstanding and outcry when it was discovered that Hillary Clinton discussed and transmitted actual classified information on her own private personal devices and servers. Where were the calls for resignation of Representative Eric Swalwell when not only employed a known Chinese spy, but also engaged in a romantic relationship with her? Mostly there was the accountability for the Biden administration's when 13 American soldiers were killed at Abbey Gate during the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. Many people, especially from Fox, including Will Cain recently, who argued with Democrats, I think he was talking to Jason Crow, and he brought up the whole thing. How can you call for the resignations of Secretary of Defenses and stuff when nothing was compromised? No classified information was shared, and it wasn't shared, and Signal is not unsecure. We don't know how this guy's number got into the chat. In any case, and nothing bad happened. No American service people died during the mission against the Houthis, and actually the military strike was a success. So it is a nothing burger, hullabaloo. There's nothing to be concerned here except that this seed will grow into a large narrative that will dog the Trump administration, at least in the near term, probably until the midterm elections. All right. The more important, this is all, I try to concentrate on domestic politics first, because these are most pressing and they affect us in the near term. But what's going to affect us also internationally, the article from the Metro states, Britain and France sending military teams to Ukraine to deter Putin. Now, what does that mean, military teams? That means boots on the ground. It's advisors. The United States and most NATO countries have intelligence and special forces already working with the Ukrainians in Ukraine. They're directing the majority of the attacks, and they're coordinating with Ukraine and trying their best not to have American military killed while fighting the Russians. It has happened. And some of these special forces people are chalked up, the clandestine special forces people, not just any Green Beret, Delta, or SEAL. They have to be stripped and cleansed and are actually working for the CIA with the Ukrainian troops. Some of these people have been killed, and then they've been listed as either deserting or as private citizens that have went to fight with Ukraine. But now we have these 4 missing service people supposedly that went missing during a training exercise in Lithuania. And I'm going to get to that story in just a second. But more importantly, this Metro article goes on to say that British and French military teams, they don't say soldiers, of course, will be deployed to Ukraine in coming days. Emmanuel Macron has confirmed. The delegation from the UK, and it's a delegation, not, a battalion or anything. UK and France will be sent to work with Ukrainian armed forces as a part of a reassurance force, even if the idea is not backed by all European allies. This was revealed after a summit in Paris aimed at strengthening Ukraine's hand and its military, attended by Sir Keir Starmer, Volodymyr Zelensky, and other Western leaders. This is all an attempt to keep the Ukraine war rolling, and that's not what we want. So first they said, the British and French we're going to send peacekeepers. Now they're going to send military teams, whatever that means. They already have military teams working with the Ukrainians in Ukraine. So this is something more. While you have to announce that you're sending military into Ukraine before these military personnel can be killed by Russians, and then that could be announced, and then they would hope that the patriotism behind, or the wave of resentment behind, French soldiers or British soldiers being killed by Russians, that people will support a war against Russia, which is crazy. All right, let's get to this article from One American News. NATO corrects statements on the 4 missing U.S. soldiers after Secretary General suggested they died during exercises in Lithuania, but they had to walk that back. On Wednesday, NATO clarified previous remarks said by Secretary General Mark Rutte after he announced that 4 U.S. Army soldiers were killed in NATO training exercise in Lithuania. The U.S. Army never confirmed the Secretary General's initial announcement. What does this mean? Well, I think this has something to do with what I was just talking about. Are they trying to rattle sabers amongst the American or NATO country's public to get people to back a war with Russia? Now, they say they were killed in a training accident. I think this is just a way, before they notify families that they were killed, or maybe they were kidnapped by Russians, and they're trying to allude that Lithuania is on the border with Russia. It isn't. It's a Baltic state. Well, it is on the border with Russia, but I'm not going to get into that. And that's why this is a trigger point, that they're going to say that the Americans were abducted by Russian forces and killed or captured or whatever. It's coming. And again, this is all to keep the Ukraine war rolling. All right, let's get back to the article. The U.S. Army had stated that the Hercules armored vehicle carrying the 4 soldiers had been found submerged in a body of water while they were conducting exercise. As of Wednesday, recovery efforts were still underway by the U.S. Army and Lithuanian armed forces, as well as civilian agencies. The Lithuanian Army also previously announced that there's currently no evidence or information confirming the death of the troops, which means they didn't find the bodies. Now, did they die in an accident? Armed forces, military personnel often die in motor vehicle accidents. They travel very fast, and this was happening in Iraq because their convoys would travel really fast to resist roadside explosives or try to defeat them. And a lot of times they get into accidents or fall into canals and they drowned. And if you have body armor on, it's difficult to get out of the water. Get drowned. All right, let's move into a related article from Zero Hedge. Zero Hedge, European force in Ukraine could respond if attacked by Russia, says Macron. Coalition of the Willing is mulling a European army which could be deployed in Ukraine peacekeeping capacity, except for the President Emmanuel Macron has also admitted these Western forces could be ready to join the conflict if provoked. Macron is currently hosting the leaders of nearly 30 countries plus NATO and European chiefs as the Paris summit, where, as we described earlier, they're pushing back on U.S.-backed peace plans by ruling out sanctions relief for Russia. Well, there's a problem. You're pushing back against peace plans. I thought Americans are for peace. I know that. Most people don't want to enter in military. You have to be prepared to fight a war, but you should never fight a war. And part of that preparation is deterrence. All right. Post-Millennial is reporting Senators Mike Lee, Tommy Tuberville introduced bill to abolish TSA, privatize airport security. In addition to widespread allegations of employee misconduct and theft, 2015 assessment found that the TSA agents missed 95% of mock explosive and banned weapons during checkpoint screenings. Indeed. The TSA has not only intruded in the privacy and personal space of most Americans, it has also repeatedly failed tests to find weapons and explosives. Our bill privatizes security functions at American airports under the eye of the Office of Aviation Security Oversight, bringing the bureaucratic behemoth to a welcome end. Mike Lee tells Fox News American families can travel safely without feeling the hands of an Army or federal employees. The federal employees, whether it's TSA or other, are usually not very good, especially lower levels like TSA, security, TSA security, etc. You should have professional security. In any case, is this a good bill? I think, and I'm going to get into that in just a second, ending government employment and putting it in the hands of private company, that spurs economic growth. It's apples to apples as far as cost might concern. I think it'll be more, the spending will be more effective. But employment in the private sector is better for the economy than employment in the federal sector. Also, governments are less likely to separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, by letting people go. So if you get a government job, you could be employed for life. And that's what Doge is trying to end, and that's what we have to end. And speaking of Doge, Doge team says its work is a revolution, claims work will reduce deficit by $1 trillion. We really believe that the government can have an Apple Store-like experience. Let's just get into the article here from the Post-Millennial. This is a revolution, and I think it might be the biggest revolution in the government since the original revolution, Musk told Fox News. He also noted that much of the department's work could be completed soon. Goes on to say, I think we'll have accomplished most of the work required to reduce the deficit by $1 trillion within that time frame. And Musk, who holds a special government employee status, meaning he could work on government affairs for up to 130 days a year, when he asked if he would stay behind that limit, he said that he thinks he could accomplish everything by May. He also admitted we wish things were moving faster. What seems like incredibly fast action by government standards it's slower than I'd like, to totally be frank. All right, Frank Musk. More needs to be done. I'm a small federal government type person. I try to be fiscally responsible in my own life, and I think the government should do the same. Because the problem has been spreading around money from the federal government money tree is what liberals like, because they see it as an effort to skim money. And so any spending is going to have leeches upon it to suck some of the money. And anybody knows, if you know much about finance, the more money moves around, the more opportunity for wealth creation. The velocity of money is what causes economic upturn, because the more money is moving, the more opportunity there is to make it. And Just the News chimes in, Musk confident Doge will cut $1 trillion in spending by May. As I just went into previously, the CEO, Elon Musk, Thursday on Fox expressed confidence his team was on track to reduce federal spending by May. Next headline, stay with me, from the Federalist. Idaho bill sitting on GOP governor's desk could shatter school vaccine mandates. Now, what's this about? In this article by Alice Giordano, she goes on to say, a medical freedom bill waiting to be signed into law in Idaho Governor Brad Little might end mandatory school immunizations across the U.S. This is good news. The Idaho Freedom Act would prohibit businesses and schools from requiring any medical intervention such as vaccines for attendance or employment. I'm personally waiting for some progress on this front so I could sue my old employer for rejecting my religious exemption. Let's get back to the article. The legislation was written by Health Freedom Defense Fund President Leslie Manukian while she crafted the legislation in response to the oppression of medical freedom during the COVID-19 pandemic. Manukian also emphasized its broader ramifications of medical freedom should be a universal norm indeed. And now I want to go into, my personal objection and how it relates to this story. Arguments against the ruling have been based on the First Amendment, religious belief, and free speech protections, the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause, the Title IX and Title VII laws prohibiting discrimination in schools and the workplace, respectively. So far, the Supreme Court has, for the most part, stood clear of taking on the constitutionality of school vaccine mandates. In 2024, the Supreme Court refused, without explanation, to hear a Connecticut group's challenge to the state's elimination of its long-standing religious exemption from mandatory school vaccines. And in my case, a business vaccine. But the thing is with private business is a private business could basically do whatever the fuck it wants. It could make you wear a uniform. It could only hire beautiful women. It doesn't. The only thing it has to respect is discrimination clauses, which means you can't refuse hiring someone because of what was immutable characteristics, religion, race, gender, etc. But now they wedged in there the trans thing under the gender format, which is not, if you think you're transgender, is that really immutable? But for me, it's Connecticut, the state's elimination of its long-standing religious exemption from mandatory school vaccines, which just made it that, everybody could, basically would stand to be vaccinated because they got rid of the religious exemption, which was the only thing really standing in the way of the state's power over your body, et cetera, et cetera. All right. In something related here, this is from the Providence Magazine, the Judeo-Christian Nation. And although I'm not a proponent of what's considered Christian nationalism, and I'm a believer in a secular state, divorced from religion. So the separation from religion and state. This article goes on to talk about how the Bible heavily influenced the people that, the philosophers like John Locke, who set up the mindset of the founders. And then it goes into what's considered transference from the Bible into the Constitution, etc. All men are made in the image of God. All men are created equal. Acquiring, possessing property. From John Locke's Life, Liberty, and Property, Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness, etc., etc., etc. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the great thing that it takes for the Bible and that is present in this country's constitution and founding documents is natural law. And the reason I bring up natural law and natural rights as endowed by our Creator in the Constitution is that there's a certain inalienable, there's a certain thing in nature, or if you're a religious person, in God's creation, that is fair and balanced. It might not seem fair, but there's a great deal of balance in it. And that's what is also in the Constitution. The individual rights, right? They're not human rights, they're individual rights, was set up to contradict and to conflict with democracy or mob rule. So you can't have a bunch of people voting to take away the minorities' rights, etc., because of a simple majority. So these rights, individual liberties, as I like to refer to them, are codified. So no majority can take them away. Speaking of rights, we're talking about the First Amendment rights, and we're going to talk a little bit about whistleblowers. Just the News is reporting FBI whistleblowers, including one with info on Strzok, want Bureau to review their cases. FBI agents who blew the whistle on wrongdoing with the Bureau, including one agent says he wants to share further information about working under the disgraced FBI official Peter Strzok, are calling upon the Bureau, now led by Kash Patel, to review and resolve their claims of retaliation by Biden's FBI. Indeed. The Empower Oversight sent on early March letter to FBI General Counsel Samuel Raymer asking the Bureau for help related to the improper treatment of FBI agents and employees Garrett Boyle, you know these names, Marcus Allen, Stephen Friend, Zach Stoffel, Monica Schillingsberg, and Michael Zummer. The letter also includes new details of 4 clients whose names were redacted, or at least one of them who wants to share FBI abuses for his time working under Strzok, the fired FBI supervisory special agent deeply involved in Crossfire Hurricane. Yeah, Strzok was evil. The fact that he's still bouncing around on talk shows and stuff is, I don't know. But all these FBI whistleblowers were denied due process in presenting their case, which fell on Democratic ears who were unlikely to bring the case. And this is the whole thing about weaving narrative and suppressing the truth. And the truth is that the federal government under Obama and under Biden used their political bend, their power, their bias to suppress the truth and obviously attack Donald Trump. More news on the Tesla front. Hateful goons scrawl swastikas Nazi on Tesla Cybertruck parked in Brooklyn. The ordeal, which is the latest spat of vandalism attack targeting Tesla owners and dealerships, unfolded on Monroe Street in Bed-Stuyvesant. That's Bedford-Stuyvesant at about 1 a.m. Thursday, the vehicle's camera busted one of the illegal perps crouching down to etch the hate-filled image into the vehicle as his accomplice stood by. You could see the guy his accomplice was like, "What the hell are you doing?" And the New York Police Department said they are probing the vandalism as a hate crime. Well, it is certainly terrorism, because if you're committing a violent act, or even in this case, vandalism, for a political end result, it's considered terrorism. Also from Fox News, vandal strikes Cybertruck, Tesla owner hits back. Now, this is a different one. Victim films altercation with police after vandal caught on camera slashing Tesla. So this guy, Carrie Poulat, or it's a guy, it's a woman, the owner of a damaged Tesla, posted the clip on X saying, our Tesla Cybertruck was vandalized this weekend in New Hampshire while staying at our hotel. Our vehicle was keyed within an hour of arriving. And she and her husband were told at the time of the incident that they would be getting a warrant, meaning police would be getting a warrant for this guy's arrest. And they did actually, if you saw the video, the police actually confronted the guy and he was like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's the problem with people, especially liberals. And, you know, I never believed what the conservative media used to say about the liberals steal more, they're bad tippers, et cetera, et cetera. And since then, I've witnessed quite a bit of rude behavior by people that say they're so compassionate and understanding. They're not. They're really self-aggrandizing, arrogant, egotistical, narcissistic. And that's why they virtue signal, because they're not actually good people, but they want to come across as good people. And so I've come across this again and again. And now what we have liberals saying, well, we're better people, and they're actually harming people's property. For what? Because they're convinced that the CEO of a company that produced this product is a bad person. I mean, it's more corporate terrorism, I think, than political terrorism, but it is terrorism because it both affects the corporate bottom line as well as the work Elon Musk is doing in the government. All right, we talked about this yesterday. This is from the National Review. GOP Congressman calls to defund NPR after viral exchange with pseudo-intellectual CEO. Representative Brandon Gill, Republican of Texas, said Thursday he believes National Public Radio has no right to push left-wing propaganda at the expense of American taxpayers, just one day after his viral exchange with NPR CEO Catherine Mayer, in which he exposed a publicly funded news outlet for its biased reporting. It goes without a doubt that NPR is, and she's like, my wife and I were looking at the hearing, and she comes across as like a Stepford wife, like a fembot. Very strange, obviously narcissistic, very strange. All right, we got a little time left. I started late today, so I started about quarter after. I can't seem to get rolling during the day. I think I'm just taking too much time prepping because I've been tired, and so I just go too slow. All right, important article, though. New York Times, Kennedy turns to a discredited vaccine skeptic for autism study. Now, the problem with this, before I get into the subhead, is that Kennedy turns to discredited vaccine skeptic. So there are two smear words in here, discredited and skeptic, because you can't be a vaccine skeptic. Oh my God, if you are skeptical about what vaccines can do, you must be crazy. But discredited. So I've looked at this guy's studies. I think they're chasing a red herring here. Maybe not. There are problems with mercury. But let's get back to the headline just for a second. David Greer has been hired on as a senior data analyst. So he's a data analyst, that's all. At HHS, according to several people, he will examine any potential links between vaccines and autism. And then, of course, they add that were debunked a long ago. So there are several things that we were looking at for the links between vaccines and autism. One was the preservative mercury. But More pressing was that the stacked vaccine is what we're talking about. We're not talking about all vaccines. We're talking specifically about stacked vaccines. That they have different things in the vaccines, including each separate vaccine that they're all put together. Each of them has a preservative. Each of them has a different adjuvant, which is a purposeful contamination to stimulate your immune system. And the worry is that specifically in the MMR, which is a stacked vaccine for measles, mumps, and rubella, that these stacked vaccines with their other additives, preservatives, adjuvants, etc., not just the antigen, which is the pathogen, that somehow the interaction of these ingredients may cause a harmful effect that wasn't studied. There was a study in Asia that showed when they separated the MMR stacked vaccine that they weren't having the same results or rates of autism. I'll leave that up to you to do your own research. I'm just saying what I've read regarding this so-called connection. The new analyst David Greer has published numerous articles in the medical literature attempting to tie mercury in vaccines to autism. Like I said, I think that's a little bit of a red herring. It also goes on to say Maryland authorities also suspended Mark Greer's medical license following claims he endangered children with autism and exploited their parents. And of course, the New York Times doesn't say exactly how that was done. Federal judges have rejected the research on autism and vaccines as too unreliable to stand up in court. Federal judges again. What federal judges? Like I said, I am against the medical establishment's pushing of drugs and insisting you have to take them forever or now or to work or to do school or whatever. Because most people haven't done their research and everybody is different. So, and then once you inject something into yourself, you can't take it out, unfortunately. Last bit from this article, you'd think you want a fresh eye, said Edward Hunter, a former head of the Washington office of the CDC. This isn't a fresh eye. They have already published their results, and spending all this time and money is not going to help anybody. I am quite certain they'll come up with the same conclusion. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they will. I don't think they will. Besides, he's going to be a data analyst. He's just going to look at the data. So they're not doing a new study. He's just looking at the data and see what the data that the national or the governmental agency collects, if that's going to shed any light into their investigations. The people that don't want things investigated, that worries me. Earlier this month, federal officials announced for a large study to re-examine whether the connection between vaccines and autism. Trump has supported HHS officials who want to revisit the issue. Now, this is an important part. 1 in 36 children have autism diagnosis, compared to 1 in 150 children in 2000. So in just 20 years, the rates have tripled. And they said, well, they don't think it's because of vaccines, though genetic and environmental factors could be playing a role as well. And they're talking about genetics if you're genetically predisposed. But we've also learned that there's certain trigger genes that if they're switched on and off could lead to illness, and environmental factors. That certainly could be the case. I'm not against the thought that it could be something in the environment, juice boxes, BPA, glyphosate or atrazine could all cause it. Right, Just the News is reporting Dr. Peter McCullough, new science shows repeat COVID shots may weaken immune system. McCullough explains how the COVID vaccine spike protein may fatigue the body and weaken the immune system. I believe that's the case. And I don't believe it's just the vaccine spike protein, because apparently the virus produces spike protein also. And I think people, again, with a red herring, were chasing the antigen or the pathogen and not looking at the spike protein, that the spike proteins the virus produces, as well as the vaccine produces these same spike proteins. The problem with the vaccine, though, apparently, is that it's a self-replicating nanotechnology. So it looks like the proteins, in some cases, replicate uncontrolled. And that causes long COVID and other severe symptoms, either from the virus itself or from the vaccine. We're not sure, because we've seen young people die of these heart-related, it seems to be protein-related acute events that also seem to happen with the vaccine. And so COVID is an overall problem. And I don't believe, I believe the solution to the pandemic exacerbated the problem, didn't make it better. That's just my personal opinion. Zero Hedge, Senator Cruz introduces companion bill to prohibit the Fed from issuing a CBDC. Thank you very much, Ted Cruz. Again, with Just the News. You know, I just want to say that CBDCs are bad because it's the Anti-CBDC Surveillance State Act. Because once you have that digital currency issued by the people that control currency, they're going to use it for surveillance. Just the News is reporting Governor Youngkin pushes to strip funds from sanctuary localities. We've seen this happen. Policy appears in Youngkin's proposed budget amendment presentation, which includes federal requirement for local law enforcement to cooperate with immigration and customs enforcement. Post-millennial Maine officials refuse to comply with Trump's order barring biological males from women's sports. We are unable to sign a resolution agreement that would mandate we create a new policy that would violate the law and the Maine Human Rights Act. Here we have, time and time again, whether it's people in Virginia or people in Maine or lower district federal judges, just resisting the federal government because they're opposed to them ideologically, politically, and that's the problem. Article goes on to say the Maine officials of school districts are refusing to sign the letter of compliance, that they will follow Title IX and prohibit biological males from competing in women's sports. The Maine Principals Association, again, will say that we don't want to violate the state's Human Rights Act. Press release from the department said the entities had 10 days from the Justice Department to comply and saw, no, it's just from Health and Human Services Office or risk referral to the Department of Justice. Not going to go more into that article. They just keep reiterating that they don't want to violate a state act, to conform for federal policy. Just the News, Just Stop Oil's ceasing its violent protest part of a cultural shift, says Trump effect, and says the Trump effect had something to do with it. And then the article just goes into the fact that it's been a losing strategy for them. Greenpeace had to pay $667 million. Some of the announcements of Just Stop Oil, some of their members have served long jail times, sentences for their acts of violence. You remember they stop traffic and throw paint on rare pieces of art, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now they said they're not going to take care. They're not going to use these because they would get arrested under the Trump administration. If you were blocking a federal highway, all those people would go to federal prison. But they'd be tried in federal district court. So in liberal jurisdictions, they'd probably be let off. Speaking of liberalism, Just the News is reporting California lost 173,000 private jobs and added 181 public jobs since January 2023. The problem with this, obviously, is that socialism is having the state employ everybody. And if you don't work for the state, you don't work. And that's what Biden did. That most of the jobs he created were in the federal government, and that the private, and he was fudging those numbers, and the private job growth was very, very tepid. And then it goes into the article saying that 38% of these new government and government-supported jobs are from elderly or disabled individuals using state funds to pay household members and other minimum wage or part-time care and assistance. It also says that most of the jobs were part-time, so they're not good jobs. Daily Dot is got a couple of minutes left. Daily Dot, furry hackers who leaked Project 2025's firm's data fear leader raided by feds. The FBI declined to comment on the matter. Siege Sec, now defunct group of gay furry hackers who leaked data relating to the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. Again, I'm not going to get into it. They think their leader is arrested. Who cares about gay furry hackers? But again, members of the blue cult working together in concert to undermine the Trump administration or the election of Donald Trump. So you have government agencies and furry hackers and liberal media people hacking into Mike Walsh's Signal account, perhaps. Because more and more of us are starting to see this as a hack. To get an idea, you have to look at the European hacking scandals against the Murdochs. And anyway, I don't want to digress because we don't have time. But you have to look at that as all these individuals working together for the cause. You should just replace cause with cult. There's no cause. The American cause is the cause for liberty. It always has been. All right, moving along. Brazil prosecutor decides not to charge Bolsonaro for vaccine records fraud. This is reported by Reuters. And they're saying they're not going to go through with these charges because there's not enough evidence to support the charges, but also because they brought up Bolsonaro on charges of a coup. And so they don't need this lesser charge because their whole point is to put this guy in jail, just like they were trying to do with Donald Trump. They're all trumped up charges by it's actually a coup, a judicial coup, just as Bukele stated of what's happening with Trump with his lower districts. In Brazil, it's actually the Supreme Court that is conducting a coup against the remnants of the populist conservative political movement, which had overwhelming support in the public in Brazil, and to benefit a communist dictator, Lula da Silva. More international news, Fox News, knife. That's a knife. Knife-wielding man injures multiple people in Amsterdam, including 2 Americans. Dutch police are searching for a motive. What would the motive be, I wonder, after a knife-wielding man stabbed 5 people in Amsterdam? All those people were white. I wonder what religion this obviously insane person follows. What would the motive be? What have all the motives be in all these knife attacks across Europe? More international news. Exclusive satellite images show fresh Chinese bomber deployment in South China Sea. So yeah, the Chinese are at war with us. They're not just preparing for war, they're preparing for a kinetic conflict, but they are at war with us, fifth generational warfare. And they see, you know, tariffs and no sanctions at this point, but tariffs and stuff, they all see this as broader conflict in a fifth generational war, that we're involved with China, the communist Chinese, our ideological opposite adversary. And so they're preparing in kind. The people that are unawake is the American public, that we're already in a war with China. Wall Street Journal is reporting Chinese exporters hunt for alternatives to irreplaceable U.S. buyers. That is the American market. An industry gathering in Shenzhen, factory owners confront possible end of an era, which was the United States public just buying untaxed loads, tons and tons of untaxed Chinese goods, which that movement to China sucked manufacturing out of the United States. I think we're at 58 minutes, 55 minutes. Thanks for joining me today. Happy Friday. So every day, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. live on Rumble, I try to go through majority of moderate and conservative leading headlines in about 60 minutes. We did pretty good today, and try to give you some analysis and some digression to make everything seem to make sense, to provide context and cohesion into all the things that are being reported in a sea of information out there that just would make your head spin. So you have to leave out the stuff that's distracting and try to concentrate on the real stories that will give you the big picture. Each truth that we can extract from each story is a puzzle piece that helps us put together the big picture. All right, thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, and share the podcast. Check out my other website, libpop.org, or check me out on social media, X, Facebook, Get Our Minds, True Social, Substack. Stay hip to the trick. And I'll see you next week. Respect.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
This is a conspiracy.
The New World Order.
I'm an American. I have rights.